So we met in September of 2006.
We worked at KeyBank together, and when I saw her, I thought, wow, that is a really, really pretty girl. And so then I caught her at the stairwell and asked her if she wanted to go to lunch, and she said no. And so that happened every day for an entire week. And then by that Friday, she had finally come down and asked me if I wanted to go to dinner. And so we went to dinner.
I definitely identified as a Muslim. I agreed with some, didn't agree with some, but it was just the way that I was taught, the way that I was raised. It just wasn't in our culture to date outside of our culture or religion.
So we went to dinner that night, and she said, well, she goes, the reason I said I couldn't go to lunch with you is that it's Ramadan and I'm fasting. And so it just so happened that the church that I was going to at the time was having an invite your friend to church Sunday the next Sunday. So I said, well, why don't you come to church with me?
Growing up was very, very chaotic, very emotionally abusive. I always felt this hole that nothing could fill, not, reading the Quran more, or, being a better person, or always doing the right thing and always doing what I'm told, and always left a void. So he invited me to church, and I said yes, but I remember telling myself a long time ago that I would never become a Christian. Like, maybe I'd stop believing in Islam, but I would never become a Christian, because the majority of Christians that I met told me I was going to hell, I worshiped the devil, and immediately I just wanted nothing to do with it. Started going to church with you, and shared with me and reiterated what it meant to accept Christ as my Savior, and that chaos will never go away if you don't have Christ. And Christ is not going to take away all the chaos, but that is the void that you have in your life. And that was the day. It was November 17th of 2006. I had prayed to accept Christ as my Savior. Did not share with my family or any of my friends.
So we got married in April of 2007. A week after getting back from our honeymoon, Faye came to me and told me that she was just feeling very conflicted about our marriage and about being a Christian, and she felt like she needed to move back home to her parents' house.
I really just missed my family, and I just never had an opportunity to have anyone in our life at that time that was a connective piece to who I used to be.
And I understood where she was coming from and the feelings and emotions that she was going through. But it was embarrassing for me. Gosh, I'm 24 years old and I'm already divorced. And how could God possibly use me at this point? We were divorced in June, and by July, I had moved to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to just start over.
I went on a one-way trip to Lebanon and thought, I'm just not coming back. And while we were there, I remember taking my Bible with me and just wanted to continue to read my Bible, and felt like I should really try to reconcile with Josh, and showed up at his doorstep in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and unannounced.
As soon as I had just surrendered that to the Lord and shared with him my desire to be obedient, I immediately had a sense of peace that came over me. Drove to her hotel and knocked on the door and said, if you want to come back, come back.
We call that round two. Along the way, Josh was always consistent that, in our home, we're going to serve the Lord, and I would go to church with him. And, I always had that peace that Christ filled that hole, but I just didn't know how to let go of everything else that I had to lose because of that decision.
Shortly after that, she came home and she said, I need to talk to you. And she said, I met a Muslim lady at work, and I've been going to the mosque, and I want to start practicing Islam here in the home. And I just felt very convicted that you can believe whatever you want to believe. I'm not going to tell you what you can or can't believe, but as for me and my house, we are going to serve the Lord.
In those times of going to church and knowing what the truth was being said, and just really fighting it off, I just kept going back to I just want my family back, and I really missed my family.
What people may not realize is that when you grew up in that culture, you don't just walk away from your religion, you walk away from everything that you've ever known. She needed to pursue the faith that she thought she needed to, and let me know that she wanted to move back to Ohio. It was just extremely frustrating, and the first time where I was probably more understanding and embarrassed, the second time I was just mad.
2.0 was over, and got a divorce, and I just wanted to start all over. Like, I was just so sick of the back and forth and the chaos that I created. And the chaos was created because I was always trying to control different aspects of my life. So I'm going to control the issue, the marriage that I have with Josh. I'm going to control trying to make my family happy. I'm going to control, trying to regain trust back with old friends and family members. And it was exhausting, and felt like I needed to start making a routine to go back to church and learn more about Christ, and was going to counseling once a week and how to deal with this decision. And without wanting to control things myself, I genuinely knew that God was saying, like, you need to reconcile your marriage with Josh. Tried calling Josh a couple times. I even did another surprise visit. I had lost the benefit of the doubt. I mean, I had gone back on my word so many times that just saying that that's something that I wanted wasn't enough, and I knew it wasn't enough. I would say I had a little bit of a delayed walk where, yes, in 2006 I had accepted Christ as my Savior, but it really took until March of 2009 before I really surrendered my life to the Lord. And it was one day, and it was, an emotional mess, and just feeling like my family wanted nothing to do with me. Josh had legitimately moved on, and I just hated my life, and went into the church and got on my hands and knees and just prayed to God and said, God, the only peace I ever knew was when I accepted you as my Savior. And I don't think Josh wants anything to do with me. My family wants nothing to do with me. But even if that's the case, like, I want that peace, and I surrender my life to you. This was the decision I needed to make for my eternity, not contingent upon anybody else. And it wasn't about just taking what Christ had done for me and saying, well, I know I'm in. It was truly surrendering to the Lord and saying, I commit my life to you. And I walked out of the church still crying and still a mess. And 2 days later, Josh called.
By the end of that conversation, I had heard and talked to a completely different person. And it was through that she had shared with me that she started to see a biblical counselor who was discipling her. And I said, I think we should keep talking. And I said, I'll call you back next week after your next counseling session. And we did that probably for 2 or 3 months. We were finally on the same page.
We got married again, the third time, third and final.
At that point, we were both in relationship with the Lord, and our marriage could move forward. God was telling me, Josh, this is the woman that I have chosen for you, and this is your wife. And so being obedient to what I felt like the Lord was telling me to do was important. And she's my first choice. Like, I want to be with her. And when we were both on that foundation of a relationship with Christ, then it was like, yes, this is sustainable, and this is, we can build a future on this. So, and we've had challenges. We have 2 children, and so we've got a son, David, who's 7, and he is a wonderful boy. We have a daughter, Catherine, who is equally as wonderful, and she was born with Down syndrome. And so the challenges that we face with her developmental disability are things that we've never faced before. I couldn't possibly imagine going through life, raising her with Faye, and us not being, having our marriage built on the foundation of Jesus Christ.
I'm so thankful for Josh introducing me to Christ, and so thankful for what Christ did for me and what he has done in our house. And as I've reconciled with some of my family, we've had people come to me and say, you just seem so much more peaceful than you were before. And I can't change what I did in the past. I can't change the fact that I went back and forth so many times, but I know I can do the right thing going forward.
We realize that our marriage is not any better, it's not any worse, but our marriage is built on the solid rock. And because of that, we know that no matter what comes along and what challenges we face, we can face them together with the Lord.